Of course it bothers me.
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
It sounds like arrogance. The cold, almost bored dismissal of a man who simply does not care what the world thinks of him. But what just happened in that sentence is the opposite of arrogance. Tywin Lannister just performed a technique that psychologists call moral disengagement, the mental move of stripping your rivals of their human standing before you decide how to treat them. When you rename someone a sheep, you do not have to feel guilt about what happens to them next. They are not people anymore, they are a category. And Tywin has been doing this his entire life. The word sheep is not an insult. It is a classification system. And classification systems, in the hands of men like Tywin Lannister, are the most dangerous weapons in any room. To calculate the atmospheric pressure of this war camp, we must understand what is at stake between these two men before a single word is spoken. Tywin is not calm in this scene. He is controlled, which is a different thing entirely. Control is what calm looks like when fear is running just below the surface. He has just learned that Catelyn Stark has taken Tyrion prisoner. That is not merely a military problem. That is public proof that a Lannister can be seized without consequence. For a man whose entire power rests on the perception of invulnerability, that single fact is an emergency. The knife in his hand keeps moving. He will not let Jaime see him stop. Jaime, standing across the tent, is in a different kind of trouble. He knows he has made a mistake. Attacking Ned Stark in the street was reckless and stupid, and he knows it. But Jaime's entire identity is built on not caring about being wrong. He uses wit the way other men use armor. So he walks into this conversation already performing, already trying to be clever.
Summoned to court to answer for the crimes of your bannerman, Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. Arrive within a fortnight, I'll be branded an enemy of the crown.
The summons is being read aloud, but Jaime is not delivering news. He is testing the room, watching Tywin's hands for a reaction that never comes. What is at stake if the anchor line fails to land? Everything. Tywin's authority over Jaime rests on Jaime choosing to accept it. Tywin has no chains. He has only the weight of what he represents, legacy, dynasty, the name that Jaime carries but has never fully honored. If Jaime walks out of this tent unchanged, the War of the Five Kings begins with House Lannister already fractured at its spine.
Lannisters, don't act like fools.
Tywin says 4 words. Jaime fires 10 back. The ratio tells you everything about who needs something from whom in this room. Watch what Tywin does with language in this scene. He does not argue. He classifies. The anchor line, a lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep, is not a rebuttal to Jaime's worry about being called Kingslayer. It is a reclassification of everyone outside House Lannister into a different species. Lions do not owe sheep an explanation. Lions do not feel shame before sheep. Lions do not count the opinions of sheep the way frightened men count votes. Notice the exact construction. He does not say, I don't care what they think. He says the lion doesn't. The lion, not Tywin, not Jaime. The category, which means the line is not personal confidence, it is doctrine. It is a rule of behavior being handed down from a father to a son, dressed in the grammar of nature itself. As if the hierarchy between lions and sheep is not a choice but a fact of the physical world. The surface reading is easy. Tywin is telling Jaime to stop being weak, to stop losing sleep over what people whisper behind his back, stop being governed by feelings and start being governed by position. That reading is incomplete, because Jaime says something that breaks it open. He says, of course it bothers me. And Tywin does not flinch. He does not soften. He does not acknowledge that Jaime just told the truth. He simply fires the doctrine back. Which means the doctrine is not a response to Jaime's truth. It is a wall built against it.
Spend too much time worrying about what other people think of you.
I could care less what anyone thinks of me.
You know, that's what you want people to think of you.
Here is what this scene is actually about. Tywin Lannister's father was Tytos Lannister. Tytos was the opposite of everything Tywin became. He was generous to the point of weakness, forgiving to the point of humiliation. He lent gold to houses that never paid it back and laughed it off. He allowed his bannermen to mock him in his own hall. The Reynes of Castamere, a vassal house, rose up against him because they had learned correctly that there was no real cost to defying a Lannister. Tywin was a boy when he watched this happen. He was a boy when he first understood what it meant to be laughed at through your family name. He spent the rest of his life building a wall against that memory so thick and so cold that no one, not his children, not his allies, not his enemies, would ever be able to see through it. Watch his body language here. The knife never stops moving. He keeps his eyes on the carcass almost the entire scene. Direct eye contact would require acknowledgement. Acknowledgement would require presence. And presence for Tywin is a form of exposure.
When you hear them whispering Kingslayer behind your back, doesn't it bother you?
Of course it bothers me.
The word Kingslayer is doing specific work here. It is not just an insult, it is public humiliation delivered in a whisper, the exact form of contempt that broke Tytos Lannister. Reputation damage absorbed quietly in corridors, behind closed doors. Tywin knows exactly what that whisper costs, because he spent his childhood counting the price of it in his father's face. So when he delivers the projected denial, "You spend too much time worrying about what other people think of you," he is not correcting Jaime. He is externalizing his own oldest wound and handing it to his son to carry. The psychological architecture here is clean. By naming Jaime's sensitivity as the problem, Tywin does not have to name his own. The doctor is operating on a patient with his own symptoms. What is Tywin feeling in this exact moment? Controlled fury. The specific anger of a man who has rehearsed not flinching for 40 years and now has to do it again, in a tent with a son who keeps making the same mistake Tytos made, letting emotion override position.
So the Lion does concern himself with the opinions
No,
of...
that's not an opinion, it's a fact.
Look at what Jaime just did. He caught the contradiction. He held Tywin's own line up against Tywin's own actions and said, "Wait, you sent 30,000 men to correct a perception problem. That is caring about opinion. That is the sheep's opinion mattering." And Tywin's answer is a masterclass in reclassification. Not an opinion, a fact. He does not rebut the logic. He elevates the category. Opinion belongs to feelings. Fact belongs to physics. By calling the family name a fact rather than a reputation, Tywin removes it from the domain of things that can be argued. You do not debate gravity. In 1630s France, Cardinal Richelieu formalized a principle that had existed in practice for centuries but had never been given its full name. He called it raison d'etat, the reason of the state. The idea was simple and total. The house, the nation, the dynasty has its own moral logic. It does not answer to personal honor. It does not answer to religious scruple. It answers only to its own survival and expansion. Richelieu used this doctrine to execute noblemen who had technically done nothing wrong under the law of the land, because their existence threatened the stability of the crown. He was not cruel. He was systematic. He had separated personal morality from structural necessity so completely that the two no longer interfered with each other. Tywin Lannister is operating from the same architecture. Watch how he builds it in this scene. Not your personal glory, not your honor, but family. The pivot word is but. Personal glory and honor are named and then discarded, not because they are worthless, but because they belong to a different accounting system. Tywin runs a different ledger, the ledger of the name.
Your mother's dead. Before long I'll be dead. And you. And your brother. And your sister. And all of her children.
This is where the scene changes register completely. The knife slows. The productivity of the skinning pauses. For the first time, Tywin is not performing invulnerability. He is administering it, directly, clinically, like a dose of something Jaime needs whether he wants it or not. The delivery of raison d'etat reaches its peak here. Tywin does not say, "The family matters more than you." He says, "We are all going to die and only the name survives." He has converted personal mortality into structural argument. Death is not a tragedy in this speech. Death is a data point that proves his thesis. Everyone rots. The name does not. Therefore, the name. The anagnorisis, the moment of true recognition, lands in Jaime's silence after the glorified bodyguard line. He served a madman. then a drunk. He is 30-something years old, the most physically gifted fighter in Westeros, son of the most powerful lord in the realm. And he has nothing to show for it but a nickname whispered in corridors. Jaime has no answer because there is no answer. The recognition lands, and Jaime cannot close the door on it.
And what have you done with these blessings, huh? You've served as a glorified bodyguard for two kings. One a madman, the other a drunk.
But here is what the show never told you. In the source material, George R.R. Martin's A World of Ice and Fire, the Reyne-Tarbeck Rebellion is given its full history. The Reynes did not simply rebel. They had been emboldened step by step by House Lannister's inability to punish them. Each unpunished insult made the next insult larger. By the time the rebellion came, the Reynes believed, correctly, based on all available evidence, that there was no real cost to defying a Lannister. Tywin was not yet Lord of Casterly Rock when he put them down. He was an heir, a young man watching his family name dissolve in real time. The drowning of the Reynes in their own minds, which became the song The Rains of Castamere, was not an act of cruelty. It was a young man's total, absolute answer to the specific fear that had defined his entire childhood. The fear of being the family that other families laugh at. This changes everything in this scene. When Tywin says the name is all that lives on, he is not delivering philosophy. He is describing his wound. The Reyne-Tarbeck Rebellion is the trauma event that this entire monologue is a response to. Every rule Tywin hands to Jaime, the doctrine of the lion, the rejection of personal honor, the elevation of the name above the person, every single rule was written in the specific aftermath of watching his father be humiliated and deciding it would never happen again. This is where the thanatophobic urgency arrives in its full form. The future of our family will be determined in these next few months. Tywin is not being dramatic. He is a man who watched a dynasty nearly collapse in a single generation and has spent 40 years building the thing back. He is acutely, biologically aware that death is real and close. The urgency in this speech, not next year, not tomorrow, now, is not ambition. It is terror dressed in iron.
I need you to become the man you were always meant to be. Not next year, not tomorrow.
Haven't we all been in a room with someone who told us they didn't care what people thought and known, in the specific quiet of that moment, that it was the person who cared most? The tell is always the same. The people who genuinely do not care about reputation do not build systems around managing it. They do not wake at night running through the calculation of how every visible action reads to every watching eye. They do not name their children to project an image of dynasty. They do not send 30,000 men to correct a perception problem and then tell those men that perception doesn't matter. Tywin's version of this is extreme. Armies and executions and songs written about the ashes of houses he burned. But the psychology underneath it is something smaller and more common. We have all met the person who leads with, "I don't care what anyone thinks of me," as their opening move in every social situation. The person who performs not caring so hard and so consistently that the performance becomes the loudest thing in the room. The people who spotted it, who watched the gap between what Tywin said and what Tywin did, were the ones who outmaneuvered him. Tyrion, his youngest son, spent his entire life reading that gap. Every time Tywin claimed not to care about opinion, Tyrion saw the machinery running underneath the claim. And eventually Tyrion used it. He used the gap between the doctrine and the fear to walk into a trial and dismantle the most powerful man in Westeros in front of the court Tywin had spent his life controlling. The real-world version of this is not armies. It is smaller. It is the manager who says they don't care about titles but requires a specific seat at every meeting. It is the parent who says they only want their children to be happy and then communicates, in every nonverbal signal available, exactly which version of happiness counts. It is anyone who has ever wrapped fear in the language of indifference and handed it to someone else to carry. The line that reveals control dressed as philosophy is always this: the person who does not care about opinion never needs to tell you so. This wasn't arrogance. It was a man showing his son the only map he had ever been given. A map drawn in the rubble of his father's humiliation, and the ash of a house that laughed too many times at the wrong name. The line, "A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep," was never about Jaime. It was Tywin telling himself the same thing he had been telling himself since he was a boy watching Tytos Lannister be mocked in his own hall. The doctrine worked. For 30 years, it built the most feared house in Westeros, until the sheep he most openly dismissed, the son he called the lowest of the Lannisters, walked into a privy and ended it with a crossbow. Next time you watch this scene, do not watch Tywin's face. Watch the knife. Notice how the skinning never pauses until your mother's dead. That is the only line in the entire scene that cost him something real to say. Everything else is architecture. That line is the man underneath it. Here is the question that two reasonable people will answer differently. Was Tywin building a dynasty, or was he running from a memory? Because the answer changes everything you think you understand about every decision he makes from this scene to his last. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you in the next.